One of the things I've been taken by, and it's one of the reasons I went into this field actually, is some of the findings many of you have probably read about in terms of what's called a mystical experience that can sometimes be generated by a psychedelic, particularly a classical psychedelic like mescaline, LSD, psilocybin, DMT. A quick history on that. So when the research began in the 1950s and 60s with LSD primarily, they found that it generated these powerful spiritual experiences. Walter Pahnke, one of the earlier researchers, had devised a scale called the Mystical Experience Questionnaire, which gleaned features from looking at the historic arc of mystical experience throughout the arc of history, and noting that at the core of the major religions was this mystical core. And he felt early on, they felt that these experiences kind of mirrored what we've read about in the mystical core of religion. So the scale was devised, and it's still being used today. So more than a half a century later, researchers at primarily at Johns Hopkins who really developed and expanded the scale, but now we're all using the scale, not all of us, but many sites, to help measure the experience. So what is this mystical experience we speak of? So the questionnaire is only a few features. One is a profound sense of unity, that the person under the influence of the medicine has a profound subjective sense that all things are connected, that we're not separate, nor is anything separate. And that's a very felt experience. Another important one is a sense of transcendence, that the person experiences a subjective sense of transcending consensus reality, as we know, time and space, as we know, past, present, and future, as we typically know in ordinary consciousness. Also transcending this body. So if one is dying of cancer or dying of anything, the experience, the insight that I'm not just my body, I'm not this cancer, I'm something more enduring, possibly. That's a profound therapeutic insight or a gift to that person. Another feature is sacredness, of holiness and wonder and awe. Another is deep positive emotions like love and peace, but also very difficult emotions like we've spoken about. They can be very, very challenging and frightening experiences. One is ineffability. It transcends language. It's hard to talk about. There's no words to describe it. And so, and one is noetic quality. Noetic quality was a term coined by William James in the early 20th century that characterized these experiences as just so profound, but they spoke with authority. So people, patients in our studies rarely say something like, "Oh, that was good or bad or indifferent," but it was a drug effect. And more likely, the language is that was ultimate reality. That was more real than this, or that was part of reality. It speaks with that kind of authority. So in that regard, we've been measuring this experience, which again we see at the basis of religions and also part of humanity. A recent Pew study showed that almost half of Americans have some kind of spiritual experience in their life, not these hours-long experiences, but some sense of that. And we found, like the early researchers, that when people have a complete mystical experience of a certain magnitude, that's been correlated with a greater clinical outcome. So in the case of the cancer trials, a greater reduction in hopelessness, depression, anxiety, anguish, fear, demoralization in response to dying. It's also been looked at in terms of smoking cessation and other trials we're doing. So there's something about the spiritual essence of these experiences that seem to be predictors of greater outcomes. Now, as a scientist, we can look at that from other language as well. My personal feeling is probably scientists and religion are also talking about the same thing, but with a different language. But we are seeing this in these studies, and to that effect, we're completing a study this year that I can't talk about the results yet, but where we provided psilocybin, high dose psilocybin, to religious leaders to have them help us map out and discuss the phenomenology, the nature of these experiences. Um, and people are often changed by this. It doesn't make them, well, there's one survey Hopkins did that it didn't make people more spiritual, um, but it does deepen, I think, our insight as to what we're doing here, kind of the existential and spiritual, uh, the nature of what it means to be human. And I think much of that is around impermanence and even the existentially kind of themed discussion of death and dying that we were doing a little while ago, that these experiences can bring us into those experiences in a very profound way. But this mystical experience and these cluster of features do seem to be generated. And much of the patients we see, about 65% or so of patients in our trials, have a complete mystical experience. So those features, ineffability, transcendence, unity, noetic quality, sacredness, are felt at a very deep level. And that seems to have a positive outcome.